because that is just so important. And the reason it is important is because you actually create magic for fun. And each and every one of you do that every single day. I don't think anyone can hear me. Who would have thought I could actually be at the point where no one can hear me? All right, can you hear me now? Yeah. Awesome. You do actually have a magical effect on people's lives through what you do every day. So when we put out this soapbox question to everyone via the bulletin and ask people to put up their hand to come up here and talk to their colleagues during the conference, we had one hand come up and he said, HB, I want to come and do some magic. So I'm going to leave it there and introduce you to someone that many of you know very well. Mr. Darren Cheek is going to give us some magic.
I'm going to start doing some great magic today, like this trick, like you know, that one, like, whoa, look at that, back again, right, you know, yeah, oh, that's pretty good. Today I'm going to show you a bit of magic. We're going to go through some great things. It's all about choosing your state of mind, and what we've done in this tricks, during this conference. One of the things I thought of when we're looking at Peter Greshke, that how amazing, not just Peter Greshke, but also you think back a couple of years ago and we saw Terene Pitt, that ultra marathon runner, and a couple of years ago we saw Paul de Gelder, remember the Navy SEAL that got eaten by a shark. Would have he known what he's going to do after he leaves the Navy? He probably had no idea what he was going to do. And it's just amazing how change, how in their cases, how such a tragedy can come good fortune. So he went through such a tragedy but changed his life, and now he's a full-time motivational speaker, charging 10, 15 grand a pop. And so the type of changes that we're going to have are just, I think I'll pass out a sack with the nerves, sorry. But so with this change that's happening during the, in our lives with the education and all the rest, they're the things that we have to remember, that with such change can make such great things. One of the things that wasn't so great at this conference has been the fines. And so I want to crack a couple of fines while I'm out today, doing my magic. Daryl. He should be fined first off for the telling private stories about people. But what I thought I'd do, he's going to get cheeky with me, but he was telling me a very private story. He's had some hard times in his life, and he thought he should go and see a psychiatrist. So he walked into the psychiatrist, only wrapped in glad wrap. Psychiatrist said to him, well, I can clearly see your nuts. $50. Okay. You're a good crowd. This is the time I was going to try and get you to loosen up, close your eyes. Think of you're sitting at the bar, have a couple of shots. Got shots all lined up, and I was going to get you to knock them back. So then you open your eyes and you're all ready to go, right, to fire up. But no, you're a good crowd, so I don't think we need to do that. So today I'm going to talk to you about some real feats of magic. Never before seen in the essence, and I say never before seen because this is the first time I've ever done magic. Some life-threatening tricks. I'm going to make one of you, I haven't picked them out yet, but one of you I'm going to make disappear. Bring you up here on this chair, and I'm going to make you disappear. So it's very life-threatening because I have been trying it, and I tried it on one of my kids about 3 weeks ago. I haven't seen him since, so I haven't kind of got to bringing him back fit yet, right? And so if you don't enjoy the magic I've done, look, don't come up to me afterwards and tell me how shit it was, right? Just forget it. But if you like anything, please, if you see me at the bar, buy me a beer. That's what I'd like. So, first off, think I learned this. Oh, where's that duck? Oh, this duck, it just keeps disappearing. It's just amazing. Every time I put it in here, then he's gone. And then he appears back here again. I keep putting it back in here. And then he pops back up here again. I can't believe all these ducks just keep coming around. I put him back in. What's going on? But he's gone. I haven't got him anymore. I think I can hear there's a duck out there. Everyone, look underneath your seat. There's, on the back of your seat here, there's a duck out there. He disappears sometimes. He does that. Has anyone got a duck? Has anyone got the duck? Hey, Andrew, come up here. I got a trick to show you, mate. Andrew, look at this. It's beautiful. There's a couple of playing cards, normal playing cards. Right? Two, green. Right. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing trick. This little. Yeah, look at duck. Well done for bringing a duck. Thanks for coming up anyway. We never met before, have we? Never. You sure? Okay, good. See, so it's not too. Look at this little trick. Normal card. Okay. Levitate. Look at that. Amazing. What do you think about that magic, Andrew?
Well, I think it's a
It's not working.
Wow, here we go.
What do you think about that one?
Mate, it's a cool trick, but I don't think it's magic.
It's not magic.
I don't think it's magic.
Will you tell me what's magic then? Go on.
I think what's magic is what we all do every day. Now, anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a risk specialist from Rockhampton. Been doing this a little while now. And I've been invited along today to give a story. Now, I don't think the story is any different to what anybody else in this room does, but I'd like to share it with you anyway.
Just take over. I was doing all right.
It's a story of some clients of mine that it just hits home that what we do is important and it makes a real difference to people's lives. These people are really good friends of ours, and we took their business over in 2015 from another advisor, reviewed it, did everything that we could. And when I spoke to them, their lives had changed. They owned a business in Rockhampton, and they wanted to make sure that they could afford the premiums moving forward. So they wanted to cancel their trauma insurance. And I said, I can't let you to do that. I know you too well, I can't let you cancel your trauma insurance. And they said, no, we need to reduce the premiums, we need to cancel this trauma insurance. And I explained what it did and everything like that, and they still want to do it. And I said, well, there's two things that you need to know, and two things that you need to do if you want to cancel your trauma insurance. You need to go to the doctor and have a checkup, make sure that everything's all good, and that there's no underlying medical issues or anything like that that may lead to a trauma claim. I said, and the other thing is, and this is probably going to hurt a little bit, but I won't do it for you. I said, if you want to cancel your trauma insurance, if that's your final decision that you're going to make, you need to go to the insurance company and do it yourself, because I'm not going to do it for you. Anyway, time went on. They came back and said, look, we've thought about it. We're going to keep it based on what you said and the fact that you're so passionate about not letting us cancel it. Anyway, move forward to the start of 2017. It was the 22nd of February 2017. They rang me and said that my friend Jenny had bowel cancer, and they weren't sure how it was going to go about because it was inoperable at that time. So they did everything that they could and everything like that, and we did the trauma insurance. Now, her husband Wayne was the biggest, he's a nice bloke, but he's one of the biggest whingers you'll ever meet. And was never an advocate for insurance, didn't want insurance, never thought what we did was any good. But we paid out that trauma claim, which was well over 200,000, and he was able to get Jenny the treatment that she needed. They did as much as they could. In November of 2017, they came back and said Jenny was terminal. So we did their terminal illness claim, and she died on the 20th of February the next year, 2018, which was last year. So 363 days she lasted. Now, Wayne, he came and sat with me on my back patio, and we had a few beers and a few tears and everything like that. But to be able to say that then, yeah, Jen's gone, we'll never replace Jen, but he's got the financial resources now to be able to carry on. He's put some legacies in place for Jen, some cancer stuff in Rocky that he does, and it was just really good. She got her Jag. She always wanted a Jaguar. So throughout the trauma journey, she bought a Jag and she used to drive that around until she couldn't anymore. But that's what I think is magic, is what we can do for those people, the treatment that she was able to get because of what we do. And I don't stand up here and profess to be any better than anybody else, we all do it. But it's just worth remembering that's what we do when we're getting bashed by all sorts of government regulations and everything like that. This is why we're here. And that's all I want to say.
You got me. That's pretty magical, and again, the tragedy that's come, and for you, it's the magic of being there and being the person and not losing sight of what that is. So yeah, no, that's pretty good. Let's get off. Thank you. Ridiculous. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just wondering. Okay, come here. Because that was so magical, he's going to be one of my little Merlin apprentices, and so he gets the Merlin hat. So another little, sorry to take over your fine session, Daryl, but another little fine I just had to throw in there. Mima, where is she? She just quietly, just sleuths around, quietly goes that she stays under the radar. She would have never got a fine because she stays under the radar and stuff. But she's not very happy with me at the moment. We were at the Astron stand, we're going around collecting all their goodies, putting them in the bag. And Astron had these little round things. And she said, "What's that, cheeky? What's that?" And I said, "It's lip balm. Lip balm, you know. That's, so, you'll be able to check it up and fix up your lips." She said, "Oh, good, I'll have one of them." After she left, I couldn't find her. And the girl at Ashland said, "No, it wasn't lip balm. That was super glue." Min hasn't talked to me since. $50. What? What's there a bit of heckling back there? What's going on? You can't just heckle, yell it out.
Mate, I just don't think that was a joke. That wasn't funny, there wasn't magic.
Huh?
Seriously, you must know some decent.
What do you want from me?
Magic 101. Can you pull a rabbit out of a hat?
Oh my God, I haven't even tried that one. Okay, so what he's done, Lee wants me to pull it out of, but no, he doesn't pull a rabbit out of a hat. Well, perhaps you come up here, and while you're coming up here, I'll work something out. Okay. So, whoa! Oh, what a magic! Whoa! You tell me it's a magic then. Well, I get my rabbit foot. Oh, you go there. Another taking over the stage.
True magic is what we do. And similar to our last speaker, Andrew, I had a husband and wife client who were part of a business that we acquired some 10 years ago. And when I went to review them, they had a single trauma policy. So we went through the review process. Both husband and wife ran two significant manufacturing businesses. So they ended up with significant levels of cover, and the wife in particular. We organised some trauma cover with attached DVD and life insurance. So about 3 years after this, I got a phone call from my husband on a Sunday saying that his wife had had a seizure whilst driving in Singapore. Was immediately rushed to hospital and she was due to have surgery the following day. a week later I found out that the surgery was successful. They removed a tumour about the size of an orange from a brain. So it was a benign brain tumour. And immediately I thought to myself, you know, brain tumours, trauma covers, and particularly the benign brain tumours, it's subject to all sorts of things. So anyhow, I said, listen, we'll start the process. At the end of the day, we submitted a trauma claim. I won't name the provider, but the trauma claim was looked at, and they came back and they declined the claim on the basis that it didn't meet the definition. So in those days, that policy had a definition of benign brain tumour and loss of 25% of whole body impairment. And she was assessed at 13%. Now, as we went through the claims process, I warned them that is a condition, it is a policy definition, needs to be met, and you know, it's black and white. Despite the fact that it was being black and white, back in those days, the bank that owned this life insurance company, so there's a hint, the bank had only just taken over the company, and it wasn't far from the days of ex gratia payments. So I went back into the insurer and said, listen, the situation is that this client has gone through every possible thing that you would expect out of a traumatic event, but it's just not triggered the definition. And would you consider an ex gratia payment? It went up the channels, came back down the channels and said, sorry, no. We really looked at it. It was talked to the most senior levels in the company, but it was assessed that it was an additional risk and it hadn't been priced into the contract, so therefore it would be unfair to the other life insurance group. So I thought, I'll take the risk. So I went back to the client and I was quite surprised at the way they accepted it, and they did accept it. It's, yep, sorry, policy wording not met. Anyhow, fast forward, the second year after that, we did a review, they were overseas. The following year, I sat down with them, and the wife had not returned to her business, and in fact had sold that manufacturing business as a result of what had occurred to her. And I said, well listen, I think what we can do now is go back and tackle this as a TPD claim. So anyhow, we put together a TPD claim, put it straight into the insurer, and we went through this extraordinary process where there was and then he in fact stopped practicing. So the report disappeared. So we had to go back and get her re-examined again. So through a process of about the best part of 12 months for this TPD claim, and it was an own occupation claim. And as a result of the benign brain tumour being removed, she had had another procedure in the interim as well because there was a bit of regrowth. She had just developed these phobias. She couldn't drive. She lived on the north side. She couldn't drive through the harbour tunnel. You know, these confined spaces. She couldn't look at a computer screen for more than 5 minutes before she started to get headaches. And I thought, again, I explained to them, TPD claims about the hardest claim to get paid. But we submitted the claim, and after 12 months, we finally got this. We finally got the claim paid, and they were just staggered that the claim was paid. They believed, and they said to me quite often, "Don't waste your time. We're not too concerned. Don't waste your time about it." But the truth of the matter is, they got paid about $1.6 million under 2 policies. We had double TPD on $1 million that had been CPI'd up. So she now has $1 million worth of life insurance paid by the insurance company for the rest of her life. And they were just staggered that eventually turned into a claim after some period of 3 years. So magic.
It's magic, mate.
I don't do this like it's my magic. Anybody in this room would have got the same result. But rest assured, if they got their insurance off the TV or through their superannuation, they wouldn't have had a claim payment. So advisors do magic and they do it on a daily basis. So that's what's really
Fantastic.
about treaty.
That's fantastic, mate. I think what I'll leave with you, apart from a flower, right, you get the main man, and you can have the main man. But you wanted to see a trick. You wanted to see the rabbit out of the hat. Can you see that? Nothing inside. Tell everyone there's nothing inside. What? Nothing inside this hat. What do we do? What are the words we say? Abracadabra. Is there any weight in there? Just say no, please. Okay, so no weight in there. But this is a pretty magic track. We can just go. The old abracadabra. There we go. Put it on. I don't know, I just fight this bloody thing all the time. But I always disappear. I don't know why it never works. Never seems to work. But next time, I'll make it work better, okay? So thanks very much. You nick off. Get rid of the hecklers. Get rid of the hecklers. Now, the trick we've been coming up with, the dangerous, scary, disappearing advisor trick. I learnt this trick only a couple of weeks ago, as I said, and I learned it, but it's kind of been slowly developing. It's slowly been coming along. It's times like I thought I needed to learn this. It's a bit like Richard Arthur. I understand Richard Arthur comes home from work, and he seems to, and Helen's got all the jobs lined up for him. So he has this, you know, the disappearing trick where grabs the golf magazine, complains of constipation, needs to go to the toilet, grabs a golf and a beer, and then he's off to the toilet, disappears for an hour until all the jobs are done. And of course, the ones when you're home, the missus says, we need to have a talk. And then another good reason of disappearing quickly. But then when you do have that talk, and then she starts talking, or he starts telling you, ladies, and the mind just disappears. Yes, dear, as I'm sitting on a tropical island thinking about other things. So that's where this disappearing act started from. But my moral of the story is classier, right? Don't be a disappearing advisor. Remember that the magic that you have within and the beauty, and it's not just about risk claims, it's also about the wealth management and turning someone's into a good saving habit, big super and retirement. And so don't be one of those. It was very interesting the other day. I came up here a couple of days early because one of my clients in Adelaide, a surgeon down there, he's got a holiday house. He doesn't have it at one of the local river or something. He's got a holiday house down at Mission Beach. And he asked me if I come down to stay with him for a night. And of course I jumped to that magnificent house right on the beach. But one of the things that really surprised me, we were sitting around talking and I was telling him about Marcia. And he said, and he was just, I said about how I have to have a uni degree by 24. I've been looking after he was one of my first clients as an intern, and that was 29 years ago now that he joined with me. And the thing I got really interested from him is when I was telling him about it, and you know, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, you know, silly old me, I don't know if I can go and get a uni degree, and I'm telling him about all that stuff. He actually got really upset and shitty, and he wanted to, now he wants to go to Parliament, he wants to carry on as his local member, because he actually got shitty because he wasn't going to have me anymore. Because I was thinking, you know, I should get out of here. What am I, you know, how am I going to get a uni degree? So it was really interesting what he was saying. Like, no, you've looked after, I can't do it. You know, I want you to keep looking after my business. So just remember that if you're going to decide just to get out because it's going to be a bit too hard. And it's really made me change my mind around. So I get all emotional about all those kind of things. Okay, so disappearing trick. I was thinking I probably need to pick someone out rather than just have a heckler and a random bloody duck finder. So I thought, who out of here always has something to say, always wants to get up on stage, and you'd love to see disappear. There's two people probably, but I decided on PJ. PJ, come on up here.
How long does this go for?
Finishes at 12:30.
Right, PJ. Are you ready for this?
I think so.
Okay. I want you to take a deep breath. Fine in your head. Okay. I want you to sit down. I want you to look at this trick. I keep feeling there's something there with you. But I might come back to it. Okay, just let me. It's getting very hot in here, isn't it? What I'm going to do, PJ, be ready for this. I am going to, at the count of 3, make you disappear. Absolutely disappear. You'll be amazed at what happens. And then I learned from after losing one of the kids, I need to bring you back as soon as possible. So then I'll count to 3 again and I'll bring you back. Okay, you reckon? You ready for that? Okay, let's do this. Now, DJ, okay? Are you ready? Okay. Go. 1, 2, 3! Magnificent, hey, good trick. Now, one of those things I was feeling inside the head there was, for some reason there was a Monique coming to me. Well, what the heck why am I pulling a Monique out of your brain? What's going on?
Oh, well, we just had a claim paid for a Monique.
No way! How is that?
Why?
Yeah. Tell me more about it. Tell me more about this Monique. What's her story?
Monique's a 40-year-old lady. 40-year-old lady that unfortunately has a debilitating illness.
Oh no.
And it's called hemiplegic migraine. I don't know if anyone's heard of.
Can you spell that for us, please?
No, I can't. But no, and so we do.
That's magic. And I just want to tell you something. It somehow came across my desk. And it's just a few words here that I'd like to try my best to read out to you. To PJ, Romani, and Mr. Insurance Engine Room. I'm guessing that's all the back stuff. It has taken me a few days to reflect and gather my thoughts, pick up my jaw from the floor and dry my eyes. To be honest, both Monique and I have been in a bit of a daze this week. It feels like a dream we are both desperately afraid we will wake up from, and it will all be just a cruel memory. After what has been more than 8 years now, a little while ago, probably 3 years after Monique's first stint in the PA, together as a family, we finally came to the conclusion that life was easier without hope. Looking back, it sounds so sad, but we found that every time we lifted our hopes, it just made the fall so much further and so much harder for us to endure. Over the years, so many times we placed our hope in this medication, that doctor, this treatment, etc. Every time without fail, the floor dropped from beneath us and we plummeted as a family further into the black hole, lost, alone, afraid and exhausted. The day to day and the minute to minute became the only thing we could focus on, our time on. Literally getting ourselves to the end of each day was and still is the mission. There was no space for aspirations, no time for dreams, let alone the simple things like a quick trip to a coffee shop for breakfast or a walk around the block on a Friday evening as a family. It took every ounce of energy we had to get to the end of the day. We just did not have the emotional strength or the physical energy, and that is where you come into it, into the picture, PJ and Pomini. In a landscape of disbelief and misunderstanding, you both and your incredible team struck a match in the dark for us. A spark that reminded us that we were important. Reminded us that we had value. Reminded us that despite the consuming darkness, there was a little glimmer of hope tucked away. If we just looked hard enough. You were our navigator through the tumultuous seas, shining the light and pointing us in the right direction where we were lost. You were the kind and supportive words in our ears when the cards seemed to collapse, giving us the strength to push forward and fight a little harder. You were our torchbearer when the weight was simply too heavy for us to carry. A tireless advocate that intimately understood and appreciated what life was for us. From the shortest text message to chin up, mate, to the frozen care packages that appeared on our doorstep. You gave us strength to get through, and even more importantly, for me personally, you gave me the gift of time. As a husband and dad, I never had enough time to get it all. All of these contributions took weight off my shoulders and allowed me to refocus on my girls. This outcome is so much more than numbers. You have given us not only surety and security moving forward, but you've given us the chance to dream again. Last week, our foreseeable life was mapped out in 24-hour blocks. This changes the entire landscape and gives us the chance to make an existence that is more than simply coping but living. You have given us redemption. One of the biggest challenges we faced was the lack of belief and acknowledgement of Monique's condition and the circumstances downplaying and questioning the veracity and severity of it all. You have made us feel heard. You have made us feel validated. You have reignited our hope and our belief that as long as you're honest, patient and persistent, the right outcome will happen in the end. PJ, I've never met a more incredibly tenacious, generous, compassionate and dedicated person before. You are one of a kind, and I hope you in some way understand how much we appreciate your tireless effort for us. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Ross, Monique, Avalon, Penelope and Baby Rose. She talked about how, or they talked about how their life was just mapped out in 24-hour blocks. And now it's getting mapped out a lot further. And so in your process, now that gets passed on to Chris, right, to bring on his magic.
Sure. So obviously I'm not alone in what I did, and I know many of you have done this for many people, so I certainly don't feel special to be up here, and I just feel very proud to be up here amongst you all that would have done the same and do the same. Just to put a bit of context on that claim, it was a very complicated TBD claim. The claim was lodged in November 2015. It was declined twice. I argued that it wasn't a pre-existing condition. I believed in the claim, and I had support from my BDM, and he believed in the claim. He even came and met Ross a couple of times, and he was persistent as I was, so I wasn't alone in the process. We fought that claim for 1,231 days. My team shared the lows and the highs, and we will celebrate the win together soon. The payment was just over $920,000, and the most important part is we've got that coming in. But the next, and I think what will be further magic, is having an alignment and a good business partner and a good financial planner to see that those funds help them into the future so that they can live a life that is without financial stress, and they've got access to the best medical treatment. We've also had further good news. This family's had very little or no good news for a number of years, but they also got an NDIS agreement last week, which, when they've had no money and no feeling of any light, the NDIS people also came and are giving them $120,000 a year to support her in-house. So I think the next part of what we're going to do is get Chris involved, and be good for you to hear how he's already done that. He's met them 3 times, and they're going to be in such a good place and in very good hands, as I'm sure your clients would be if you were looking after them.
Okay, well, Chris, just give us a couple of words. Give us a couple of minutes of what you're planning to do now. Yeah, why not? Just take over, everyone else will probably take over. This is my show, all these people.
Thanks. So I guess the first thing to say up front is PJ brought me into this decline situation quite early in the piece. It was before the claim was approved and obviously paid. And in meeting with the client and understanding their scenario, it really was heartbreaking. I mean, these people they had nothing at this stage. So when we met, we initially started to talk about how this money's going to not so much change their life, but just help them to survive. And hearing their story, it was heartbreaking, it really was. So what we did initially is we started to whiteboard what they wanted to do with the money and just let them dream of all these things. And it was a really kind of, I think, crystallization moment where we could very easily put the must-dos and the wanted-to-dos. And so when we started to put these in categories, what they had to do, they had to pay out their mortgage, they had to pay off their credit cards, they had to pay their mother back the $30,000 that she lent them just so they could survive. So they needed to get a new car, a new vehicle that had wheelchair access. So when we looked at these things and then we looked at the wanted to do, what we then did is started to educate the client. I think it's very natural for these types of clients, and just to give you a background, it was an any occupation TPD through a master trust. So it's very natural for the clients to say, well, we just want the money, we need the money. But we started to educate them around the tax implications of taking it all as a lump sum. And then we put that in context as to the had-to-dos. And really, when the penny dropped was the conversation around taking a partial lump sum as opposed to the full lump sum. And the tax savings on that was significant. I'm talking over about $80,000 or $90,000. We then went the extra step further and started to talk to clients about the option of converting what was left across into an allocated pension disability income stream and the internal tax-free earnings. You had no other assessable income, so it would be tax-free income. And for the client, what it did, instead of just getting this lump sum and seeing a bucket load of tax go out, they were actually able to sit there and itemise what their goals were going to be. But with the allocated pension, the income stream, by taking a lump sum and the income stream, it was around giving them sustainability moving forward, allowing them to plan the want-to-dos over a period of time. And that really, for me, was probably the best part of that appointment. We saved them a bucket load of tax. We gave them everything that they had to do, and we gave them the ability to plan and measure out the want-to-dos. So personally, I thought that it was an amazing experience to be involved in. I think there was no better illustration in my mind of the value of insurance, the value of advice, and personally it's probably the most satisfying work I've ever done. So it was an amazing situation.
That's brilliant. One of the other magic things you probably have noticed is how these hats just keep appearing, right? But here you go. you also have a magic trick. So now the big, like another thing that these magicians, us magicians, we like to do a card tricks, of course. So, I have to do a card trick. I have to get somewhere to organise a card trick. If I can pack cards. Yeah, I can pack cards. But that's a pretty, there's Maroon here. But it's a pretty good story, and like who out there has got a story the same? Their own stories that keeps the belief within. Put your hand up if you've had some kind of claim and some kind of great results with clients. Put your hand up now. See, it's just fantastic. And if you've never had a claim, use these stories. You can use them. You can just say, I know an advisor of mine that we did this and they did that. But I noticed you, mate, you had your hand up then. So would you like to perhaps share your little thing while we do a bit of card tricking magic? Empty envelope, empty, yep. Empty envelope, right, we'll close that. So we close that envelope. Let's go, what about you? John and Das, everybody, give him a clap. Do not let anyone touch it. It's good that you're on your own there. Just put it on there, yep, just don't touch it. Okay, so what we're going to do, do you want to see this magic or not?
Yeah.
Right, you don't want to interrupt me like the others do and tell me some story of your own, I suppose?
Well, before you get into your figure.
Okay, what do you got?
Well, there's been some pretty amazing examples of where magic can really be found in this industry, but a couple of that come to my mind. One of our clients actually has our practice principal's dog. She looks after it now. She's adopted it. And that's sort of how close that client came to having a relationship with us. At the time, we started from a corporate super account, which was fairly low touch with the business, and we were probably sending out lots of, you look to review your insurance, review your superannuation. Eventually, her husband called and said, I think we need to make a claim. Can you help us? Marion had been hit by a car, and she was extremely badly injured and ended up losing a limb and other complications out of the incident. And it was great to be able to come back within a few weeks and say, look, there'll be a cheque in the mailbox on Monday. You can take that down to the bank and pay off, it's $500,000 to pay off the mortgage and anything else you need to do. And that began a relationship that sort of took a journey. And it was not so much just that was enabled. From there, that a relationship developed. So it was the next phase in Marion's challenge was ended up being a divorce. But then helping her with the aged care for her family as they became unable to stay at home any longer. And just one thing led to another, and it's just standing next to people through the course of their life, and not necessarily pulling out any tricks, but just pointing in the direction that they need to go and giving them the confidence and holding their hand to go in that direction and do what they need to do. And that's just an example that she's now adopted David's dog as to how close the family and the clients do become with our business. And the second story is just one for me personally recently, where Adrian and Kim, they're in their late 50s when I first met them. They had a small defined benefit pension each, which I saw as being the safe income, lower level portion of their retirement plan, but they needed a lot more. We did a lot of work on cash flow, and Adrian became quite enthused with understanding his cash flow and where that was going. They had come very close to paying out their mortgage, and they really valued just putting more and more into superannuation, working on their defined contribution plan. And that was going really well. Kim was able to retire at 61, about a year and a half ago. And Adrian planned to work to 65, so if they get to their target, they knew from their cash flow study that they needed about $65,000 a year to have the lifestyle they wanted ongoing. And Adrian called me in July last year and said, I'm being made redundant. He didn't have much options. He knew there was an option to not become redundant but take a particular job which he knew he was not going to be eligible for. So he had to take the voluntary redundancy, and it was not just the fact that he was going to have to figure out where to from here, it was just the kick in the guts that he had been working for the New South Wales Police for so long, and now he was being made redundant, and at 61, what am I going to do? Because he and Kim had sort of become quite accustomed to putting in $35,000 a year in non-concessionals for quite some time, for about 2 or 3 years, when it was cut back to $25,000 a year, he was so enthusiastic about it, he was still making an extra $10,000 in non-concessional contributions for the last 2 years. We did the numbers, and we looked at what he was going to get as far as a package of redundancy, and worked out through the capital tracking we usually engage with our clients that we could effectively put him into retirement now, and we wouldn't be far off where he would have been if he had stuck out until he was 64, 65. That was one advantage. And as we were going through the process of evaluating what they had paid him, I got into a conversation with his employer saying, I don't really understand how come you've paid this much to Adrian in your SGC throughout that period. It's not adding up to me. And they explained to me that we don't pay SG on redundancy payouts. It took a few calls backwards and forwards until they finally, I was able to educate the New South Wales Police at HR office that you do have to pay SG on the long service leave component and the annual leave component. So an extra, $5,000 came to Adrian for that retirement, which was great.
That's super good, Mark. Give him that. So what I want you to do is pick out a card. Pick out any card you like. Oh, I'm not looking. Look. Pick out a card. Show the audience, and just point it towards the camera. Point it out. Right, you've got your card. Put it back in. Put it back in. Look. Yep. Shove it back in there. That's it. That's right. Thank you. Now, quickly. Shove it out. Shake them up. And just mix them around a bit. Is that one? That one? Yes? No! Oh, freaking heck. And for the point of time, because I know Helen just really wants me. John, can you just stand up for a second? Can you just, that envelope, can you just hold that envelope up in front of you? Hold it up, yeah. Hold it, 2 hands in front of there. Now look at me. Come a bit closer. Point towards me. Can you open that envelope and show what's in there? That's one of my good ones, eh? So, in just finishing, during the conference we've seen some great speakers, and the things to remember, Babs, he said, don't lose sight of what you do for people and how you care. What you do is what contribution you make is number one. Don't think that anything else, whether it's a Prime Minister or President of the world, don't think that their contribution is any less than what yours is. The core data, if you can get through the shitstorm over the next 3 years, the results will be extraordinary. Just remember that. Darren and Renato, advice is the product. Just always remember that. And Kwan, when he was up here on frameworks and changes, what the hell did the bloody wedding cake have to do with anything? That, I've got no idea. But thanks, guys. Thank you.
Wow. That's all I've got is wow. Thank you so much, Cheeky, and thank you to all of our amazing wizards who are still proudly wearing their hats. I think that might have been the best conference session I've ever attended, except for your crappy magic. All right, we are